Whispers of a forgotten myth. The stars shone like fractured diamonds against the backdrop of an endless void. Kara Soren's hands flew over the worn controls of her ship, the Cullis Rift, a barely operational hunk of metal she'd salvaged years ago from a derelict wreckage. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, darted from the navigation screen to the ever-changing data on her terminal. Another day of scavenging, another pile of forgotten technology to be sold in the black markets. It was all routine, until she stumbled upon something that made her breath catch. A small, unassuming box hidden in the wreckage of an ancient ship, sealed with symbols that she had never seen before. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than an outdated relic, another trinket from the forgotten age of human space exploration. But there was something in its design, something that resonated with a deep, instinctual pull. Kara couldn't resist. She cracked the seal and opened it. Inside was an intricately carved piece of stone, smooth, black, and inscribed with what looked like a sequence of ancient runes. It didn't belong to any known species. It didn't belong to anyone she knew. Her fingers hovered over it, and a pulse of energy shot through her, leaving her stunned. The stone seemed to hum with life, as if it recognized her. "What is this?" she murmured to herself, studying the object closer. The marking seemed familiar, but not in any language she'd learned in her travels. Her heart raced. Whoever made this was long gone, but the object was still radiating something ancient, and powerful. Without warning, the ship's communication system blared, a sharp ping cutting through the silence. Kara's gaze snapped to the console as an encrypted signal came through. Someone, or something, was trying to contact her. "Who the hell?" she muttered, opening the message. The screen flickered and distorted before a holographic image of an alien appeared. It was not one she recognized. The figure stood tall, its body covered in silvery scales, with 6 eyes and long, spindly limbs. Its face was mostly featureless except for 2 sharp, vertical slits that seemed to be studying her. Its voice came through distorted, but it was clear enough to make her freeze. "You can't be real," the alien whispered, its tone awed and trembling. "Humans are legend. How can you be here?" Kara's pulse quickened. Humans. Legends. This was new. She'd heard myths before, stories from ancient texts that spoke of a once mighty human race that had disappeared without a trace. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do you want with me?" The alien hesitated, then spoke again, voice wavering. "We are the Derkalians. We have searched the stars for the descendants of the humans, those who were lost to us. You are not a myth, but, this is impossible." Kara stood up, heart hammering in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The myths of the humans being some sort of ancient, revered race weren't new to her. But to have someone, an alien, telling her that they believed she was the last of them? It felt like the universe had just shifted under her feet. "What do you want?" Kara asked again, trying to keep her focus. The object in her hand seemed to pulse more strongly, almost as if responding to the presence of the alien. "We've come to take you," the Derkalian replied, his voice almost reverent. "To study you. To understand you. The legend is true, humans are no longer a fable. You're real." Kara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what she had just learned. She had to get away from this. She was no expert on alien technology, but she knew the moment they realized what she had, a living human, their entire universe would pivot. This wasn't going to end well for her. The screen went black. Kara's mind raced. She grabbed her equipment and bolted to the cargo hold, already activating the ship's engines. But before she could move, a sudden jolt rocked the Cullis Rift. Her fingers went to the control panel, and her stomach dropped as the ship's emergency lights began flashing. Damn it. The Derkalians weren't just coming to talk. They were coming to claim. The shifting stars. Varek Kor stood on the observation deck of the Naltrex, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond. The vastness of space, normally so comforting, now seemed like an endless abyss. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something monumental, something that would shift the very foundations of his world. The Nultrex was a warship, a hulking vessel crafted for command, its blackened hull scarred from countless battles. Yet today, it carried the weight of something far greater than any war it had ever fought, a legend. The Deucalion Empire had long heard of the humans, the ancient race whose technology had once ruled the galaxy. The humans were believed to have vanished long ago, leaving only myths and fragmented memories in the wake of their disappearance. But recent discoveries had rekindled the old stories, and one name had emerged as the focal point, Kara Soren. She was said to be the last human, the last living remnant of a species thought to be lost to time. Varek's mission was simple: find Kara Soren, bring her to the Deucalion capital, and study her. That was the official narrative. But Varek had his doubts. He'd been exiled from his own people, labeled a traitor, and sent on this mission not out of loyalty, but as a punishment. He was no longer the prince he had once been, he was a tool of the Empire, sent to recover a relic of a forgotten past. The truth was more complicated than the orders he had been given. Varek's fingers hovered over the data pad in his hand, flicking through intercepted transmissions and reports on the human legend. The truth was, the Deucalions feared what they did not understand, and the return of the humans, or even a single human, had the potential to reshape everything. What if the humans aren't the gods we believe them to be? Varek muttered, staring at the coordinates for Kara's last known location. What if they were just people? The door behind him slid open with a hiss, and Captain Elon Voss stepped into the room. She was a no-nonsense officer, the kind of person who carried the weight of command like a burden. Her presence was sharp, purposeful, and always a reminder of the hierarchy he had once belonged to. Your Highness, we've arrived at the designated coordinates, Elon said, her voice professional but tinged with something else, an undercurrent of uncertainty. Even she couldn't deny the tension surrounding this mission. Varek nodded, his fingers tapping against the data pad. Send out the scouts. I want to know everything about the area before we make our move. Yes, Your Highness, Elon replied, bowing slightly before turning on her heel. Varek's eyes never left the view of the stars as he processed the data that had been sent to him. Kara was on a derelict ship, one that had been abandoned for years, a relic from humanity's exploration of space. The Khalees Rift had once been a notable vessel, but now it was little more than a junkyard floating in the void, a testament to a forgotten age. Yet, something about it intrigued him. The transmission he had intercepted had made it clear that Kara was not just any human. She was something else entirely. A living connection to a time long past. And now, she was on the run. The decision to pursue her had not been his own. The Deucalion High Command had given him his orders, and that was all. But Varek was not so easily swayed. He had seen the way his people revered the human myth, how they viewed humans as gods, creators of the very technology that powered their ships, their weapons, their cities. To him, it was nothing more than blind worship. And yet, what if the myths were true? What if the humans held knowledge that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy? What if Kara Soren was the key to understanding the legends, the truth that had been buried for so long? The thought lingered in his mind as he turned to face the viewport. The stars shimmered, and the darkness of space seemed to close in around him. He was close, too close to turn back now. Hours later, Varek stood at the edge of the wreckage, the Nultrex in orbit above a dead moon. The Khalees Rift was drifting in the dark space below, its hull battered and scarred. The once proud ship was now nothing more than a floating husk, its purpose long forgotten. Send out a boarding party, Varek ordered, his voice steady. I want her alive, but don't hesitate if she resists. Understood? Understood, Your Highness, Elon replied, her expression unreadable. Varek stepped toward the lift that would take him to the docking bay. His mind was racing. This was it. This was the moment that would either confirm everything he had believed about the human race, or shatter it completely. As the lift descended, his thoughts turned to Kara Soren. He knew very little about her, only what he had gleaned from the fragments of information the Derkalians had gathered. She was a scavenger, a lone survivor, and her knowledge of human technology was unparalleled. But who was she really? What drove her? And why had she chosen to remain hidden, to keep herself away from the very people who revered her? He wasn't sure he was ready for the answer, but there was no turning back now. The lift doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Varek stepped onto the observation deck of the boarding craft. The crew was already in place, preparing to make their way to the Khalees Rift. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the quiet hum of engines and the soft murmur of crew members checking their equipment. Varek's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of his first officer, Jorah, who stood at attention. "Your Highness," Jorah said, his voice low. "We've detected movement on the Khalees Rift. Someone is on board." Varek's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "Scanners are unable to identify the life signs. They're erratic. It could be her." Varek didn't hesitate. He turned toward the boarding ramp and motioned for the team to follow him. "We'll find out soon enough." The docking bay doors opened with a blast of cold air as Varek and his team stepped onto the Khalees Rift. The ship was eerily silent, its corridors dark and cluttered with the remnants of forgotten technology. Every step they took seemed to echo in the hollow, abandoned halls. "Keep your eyes open," Varek ordered. "She could be anywhere." The team moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust that coated the floors. The ship's systems were barely functional, and the atmosphere was thick with the smell of stale air and metal decay. Suddenly, the faintest sound reached Varek's ears, a soft shuffle, followed by the sound of metal scraping against metal. He held up a hand, signaling for the team to stop. "Move in," he whispered. The team crept forward, weapons drawn. As they rounded the corner, Varek's eyes landed on her. Kara Soren. She was standing in the doorway of a ruined control room, her back to them. Her dark hair was unkempt, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, bright, defiant, and full of untold stories. She turned slowly, her lips curling into a smirk. "So, the legends come looking for me," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Varek took a step forward, his heart pounding. "You're Kara Soren." Her gaze didn't falter. "I suppose that's what they've been calling me. But I'm not the legend they think I am. And neither are you." The tension between them crackled like static in the air. Varek's grip tightened around his weapon. "We need to talk." Kara's lips twitched in amusement. "I think we do." Unspoken boundaries. Kara Soren's eyes narrowed as she regarded Varek Kor, the Derkalian prince. The smugness in his gaze was infuriating, but she had no time for pride or posturing. She had learned long ago that survival was about keeping the upper hand, even when it seemed like all was lost. Varek stepped forward cautiously, his boots scraping the debris of the Khalees Rift's ruined control room. The dilapidated console screens flickered, struggling to stay alive in the low-power environment. A soft hum echoed throughout the ship as the remnants of its once pristine technology failed to support its purpose. "I don't know why they sent you," Kara said, her voice calm but tinged with bitterness. "But I can guess." Varek's expression shifted slightly, a brief flicker of confusion in his eyes. "You know of the Derkalian Empire?" She snorted, crossing her arms over her chest. "It's hard to miss. The entire galaxy knows you're always sniffing around for more power." She paused, studying him. "You think I'm the key to some old myth, don't you? That I'll unlock humanity's secrets for you?" Varek was silent for a long moment, his posture rigid, before he spoke. "You are, what remains. The last human, according to our records. The legends speak of your kind, how humans wielded unimaginable power. The Derkalians are obsessed with uncovering it." Kara's lips curled into a wry smile. "You're chasing shadows, Varek. You've got it all wrong. There's nothing here for you. There's no magic or hidden power. Just stories, just myths. Varek stepped closer, his eyes still searching her face. You don't believe it? That your ancestors were once gods to our people? That they left behind technology capable of shifting the balance of power across the galaxy? I don't believe in gods, she snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. She was done with this, the legends, the whispers, the weight of an entire species' expectations resting on her shoulders. She was no one's savior. She was just trying to survive. Her eyes softened slightly as she met his gaze. And you shouldn't either. The tension between them crackled in the air like static. Varek stood still for a moment, his gaze unreadable. Then, with a soft sigh, he stepped back and gestured toward the control panel. I'm not here to argue about myths, Kara Soren. I'm here because I've been ordered to bring you back. Kara's heart skipped a beat at the words. Back? To the Derkalians? To the capital, Varek said, his voice calm now. The High Command believes you are essential to understanding humanity's legacy. And they will not stop searching until they have you. Kara felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known that sooner or later, someone would come looking for her. The human race, if it still existed in the eyes of anyone other than her, was far too important to be ignored forever. But to have the Derkalians, her supposed captors, pursuing her was a nightmare she wasn't ready to face. You think they'll just let me go once they get their hands on me? She asked, shaking her head bitterly. I'm not some artifact to be studied. I'm not a relic. Varek met her gaze with a cool, unwavering stare. I don't think that. But it's not my decision to make. He paused. I don't know if it's true, what they say about humans. That you can bend the fabric of reality, control energy, manipulate time. Kara's throat tightened. She had heard the rumors, the stories of the human gift, the power to manipulate the most fundamental laws of nature. But it was all nonsense. Or so she had convinced herself. If I could do that, don't you think I'd have used it by now? Varek's brow furrowed, and for the first time, there was something in his eyes that resembled genuine curiosity. Then what do you believe? What do you think the truth is? Kara couldn't answer him. She didn't have an answer, not really. She had spent years running from the past, from the whispers of a lost humanity that could never be real. She wasn't a god, and neither was anyone who came before her. Humanity had fallen, and all that remained were echoes, fragments of memories long gone. The truth, she said, forcing the words past the lump in her throat, is that humans were just like any other species. We had our time, and we screwed it up. Now we're gone, and it's better that way. Varek's eyes never left her face. And you? Are you gone, too? For a moment, Kara couldn't answer. Her mind flashed back to the endless days in the shadows of forgotten space stations, scavenging for scraps, alone in the universe. The weight of the human race had fallen to her, a burden too heavy for any one person. But even so, there was something deep inside her that refused to let go of the spark of hope. I'm still here, she said softly, meeting his gaze for the first time without the armor of anger or bitterness. But I'm not your answer. I'm not your salvation. Varek took another step forward, lowering his voice. Maybe you're right. But you're here. And I can't ignore that. The legends say you are the last, and the last means something. To the Derkalians. To the galaxy. To me. Kara's breath caught in her throat at the last words. She didn't know what he meant, didn't know if she could trust him. But there was something in the way he spoke, something sincere, something that didn't quite fit with the cold, calculating image she had built of the Derkalian prince. Before she could respond, the comms system flickered, cutting through the silence. Your Highness, Elan's voice crackled through the speakers, we've detected incoming ships, multiple readings. It looks like the Derkal Empire has tracked us. Varek's face darkened immediately, his eyes narrowing. What do you mean tracked us? They've located us, Your Highness, Elin continued. It seems they've been following our signals. We'll have company soon. Kara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. They've been tracking me this whole time, haven't they? The moment you showed up, they knew where we were. Varek didn't answer, but his grim expression said everything. The Durkal Empire had been waiting for the moment when they could corner her, when they could finally get their hands on the last human. We have to leave, Kara said, her voice suddenly urgent. You don't understand. They'll destroy everything. They don't care about me. They just want what I represent. If they capture me, if they capture us, nothing will stop them. Varek clenched his fists. I will not let that happen. Without another word, he turned toward the ship's engine room, signaling his team to prepare for departure. Kara followed him, her mind racing. This was it. No more hiding. No more running. The battle was coming, and this time, she wasn't just running from the past. She was going to have to face it. As the Khalees rift powered up, the ship's engines roaring to life, Kara stood beside Varek, her eyes fixed on the darkness outside. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know what the future held. But there was one thing she did know: the moment they left the wreckage of the Khalees rift, the legend would no longer be just a story. It would be real. The myth and the machine. The engines of the Khalees rift roared to life as Kara Soren and Varek Kor made their way through the labyrinthine corridors, the ship's damaged hull shaking with the sudden surge of power. The viewports outside were already darkening, the glow of distant stars swallowed by the blackened shadow of the approaching Durkalian fleet. The tension inside the ship was palpable, the air thick with the weight of impending conflict. Kara could feel her pulse quicken, but she fought to keep her composure. She had spent years avoiding the very thing that was now barreling toward her, confrontation with the Empire. And now, the Empire was coming for her, and there was nowhere to run. Varek, however, seemed different. His face was hard, his expression resolute, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that hinted at more than just duty. She had seen it before, the vulnerability masked beneath layers of pride and command. And, just for a moment, she wondered if there was more to him than the cold Durkalian prince who had been sent to retrieve her. Do you have a plan? Kara asked, her voice steady despite the chaos that surrounded them. She was used to the unpredictability of space, but this was different. This was personal. And it felt like the walls were closing in. Varek glanced at her, his jaw tight. There's no time for plans. We need to get to the main engines and activate the hyperdrive. I can't outrun the Durkalians in this junkyard of a ship, but if we can engage the warp drive, we can buy ourselves some time. Kara felt the gravity of his words. If they didn't escape the Khalees rift before the fleet arrived, they would be trapped, easy prey for the Durkalians. It was an old ship, barely holding together, and the chances of them successfully outrunning the enemy were slim to none. And if we fail? Kara asked, her voice tight. Then we fight, Varek answered, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. And I don't intend to fail. They reached the engine room in silence, where Varek immediately began to work on the controls, his fingers flying over the damaged console with practiced precision. Kara watched him for a moment, studying the way he moved, calm, confident, but with an edge of desperation hidden beneath the surface. You're not what I expected, Kara said after a long moment. Varek didn't look up from his work, but she could feel his attention shift toward her. What did you expect? A ruthless soldier, loyal to the Empire, she replied. Someone who doesn't care about what happens to me, just a mission to complete. Varek's lips twitched, but he didn't smile. You're wrong. I care about the mission. But that doesn't mean I'm blind to what's happening here. The Empire has lost its way. The legends about humans, they were never about power. They were about something much more dangerous. Kara's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Varek paused, his fingers hovering over the controls. It's not about the technology or the power that the Derkalians covet. It's about the potential for change. The humans didn't just create machines, they created possibilities. They could see beyond the boundaries of the present, beyond the limitations that our species have imposed on ourselves. The Empire wants that. And they'll stop at nothing to claim it. Kara's heart clenched at his words. She had heard similar sentiments before, whispers in the dark corners of the space stations she had lived on, rumors that the humans had been capable of more than just technology, that their true gift had been the ability to reshape reality itself. But she had always dismissed it as fantasy. You think I can do that? Kara asked, the weight of the question sinking in. You think I can change everything? Varek met her gaze, his expression unreadable. I don't know. But I have to find out. Before Kara could respond, a loud crackling noise filled the air, an explosion, distant but unmistakable. The entire ship trembled as a warning light flashed on the console. The Khalees rift had just been hit. The Derkalian fleet was closing in. Varek, Kara said urgently, her voice rising. We have to move now. They're boarding us. Varek cursed under his breath and turned back to the console, his hands flying over the damaged system, trying to bring the ship's hyperdrive online. I'm trying, but these systems are too damaged. It'll take time to override the failsafe. Kara's eyes narrowed. We don't have time. We need to leave now. Varek hesitated for a moment, his eyes flicking back to the control panel. He knew she was right. Every second they spent here, the chances of survival grew slimmer. But the reality of the situation was unavoidable. They were running out of options. Get to the cockpit, Varek said quickly, his tone sharp. I'll stay here and try to get the hyperdrive functional. If I can't, we'll have to fight our way out. Kara nodded, her stomach tightening with the weight of their predicament. She turned and ran toward the cockpit, her mind racing. It had always been her survival instinct that kept her alive, the ability to think on her feet and make split-second decisions. But this time, she wasn't just fighting for herself. This time, the stakes were much higher. She reached the cockpit to find the situation even worse than she had feared. The viewports were filled with the blinding light of enemy ships, Derkalian warships closing in, their massive forms blotting out the stars. The ship was no longer in control of its course, it was adrift, at the mercy of the impending fleet. Varek. Kara shouted into the comms, trying to contact him. His voice crackled through the static. I'm almost there. Just hold on. I can override the controls. We'll jump on my signal. Kara gripped the controls, her fingers white-knuckled as she tried to steady the ship. The enemy ships were getting closer, their weapons charging. She could see the bright flash of lasers in the distance, heralding the beginning of the end. But then something changed. A shudder ran through the ship, and the controls jerked in her hands as if something were pushing back, resisting her every move. It was the hyperdrive. Varek. Kara shouted again, panic creeping into her voice. And then, as if on cue, the ship shuddered once more, and the hyperdrive came to life. A violent surge of energy exploded from the ship, its engines roaring as they powered up. We're jumping, Varek's voice echoed through the comms, calm but urgent. Hold on. The Khalees rift lurched as the stars outside twisted and distorted, the ship's hull vibrating violently. Kara's grip tightened on the controls as the ship blasted forward into hyperspace, leaving the looming Derkalian fleet behind. For a moment, there was nothing but the stillness of the void. Kara's breath was ragged, her pulse racing in her ears. She could hardly believe they had made it out, but the danger wasn't over. We're not safe yet, Varek said, his voice crackling through the comms once more. We're in hyperspace, but the Empire will be hunting us. We need to regroup and figure out our next move. Kara didn't need him to tell her that. The fear in her chest had already begun to settle into a familiar ache, the kind that came with knowing that no matter how far they ran, the Deucalion Empire would never stop hunting her. And neither would the myth. Shadows of the past. The silence of hyperspace enveloped the Khalees rift as it drifted, a broken shell of a once powerful vessel now adrift among the stars. The ship's engines hummed steadily, and the lights flickered intermittently. Kara Soren stood at the ship's observation window, staring into the endless void. Her breath was steady, but the chaos of the past hours weighed heavily on her mind. She wasn't used to having time to think. Life as a scavenger, as a wanderer, was about survival, quick decisions, constant motion. But this was different. The Deucalions were closing in on them, their fleet relentless, and she wasn't sure if they'd ever be able to outrun them. Every move they made seemed to take them further from the answers they needed and closer to the Empire's obsession with the human legacy. Behind her, the sound of footsteps broke the stillness. She turned to see Varek Kor entering the observation deck, his face a mask of unreadable emotion. He'd been quieter than usual since their narrow escape, and Kara couldn't shake the feeling that he was keeping something from her. "We're safe for now," Varek said, his voice low. "But we're still in their sights. They'll follow our trail. The Empire doesn't give up easily." Kara didn't respond right away. She didn't need to. She could feel the tension between them, the unspoken distance that had formed since their escape. The prince had changed in the time they'd spent together, but Kara wasn't sure if it was for better or worse. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice blunt, cutting through the silence. "You're the one who brought us here. The one who knows about the human myth, as you call it. What happens when we reach wherever you're taking us?" Varek's eyes narrowed slightly. "We'll lay low for a while. We can't afford to go back to the Deucalion Empire, not until we have the upper hand." Kara stepped away from the viewport and turned to face him, her expression hardening. "And when we do have the upper hand? What then, Varek? What exactly is it you're hoping to find?" For the first time, Varek hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. He had never shown this side of himself before, and Kara found herself studying him, wondering what it meant. "The truth," Varek said quietly. "The truth about what the humans left behind. And the truth about you." Kara clenched her fists, her heart pounding. She could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. The truth. It had always been there, hanging in the background, but it was never something she had wanted to confront. It was too dangerous. Too powerful. And if the Deucalion Empire got their hands on it, the entire galaxy would be at risk. "You're chasing ghosts," she said bitterly. "The Empire has made its mistake, and now they'll never stop. They'll destroy everything in their path, trying to force that power into their hands." Varek's gaze darkened, and he stepped closer, his voice intense. "I'm not just after the power, Kara. I'm trying to stop the Empire from destroying what's left of humanity. I'm trying to stop them from repeating the mistakes of the past. The legend of the humans isn't just a story. It's a warning." Kara's heart skipped a beat. She had heard that before, the myth, the warning, the power that humanity had supposedly wielded. But every time she had let herself believe in it, the reality of her existence pulled her back. She wasn't part of the past. She wasn't a symbol or a legend. She was just Kara Soren, the last human alive, and she hated the weight of that responsibility. But now, as she looked at Varek, something in his eyes made her reconsider. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't here just to exploit the past for his own gain. There was something more to his determination. "And what if the truth isn't what you expect?" Kara asked softly, her voice laced with a bitter edge. "What if it's worse than you can imagine?" Varek's expression softened for a moment, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we face it together." Kara's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to argue, to push him away, but something inside her refused. Despite her fear, despite the mistrust that had been drilled into her for years, there was something about the way he spoke that made her feel, maybe for the first time, that she wasn't completely alone. Before she could respond, the ship's comm system crackled to life, pulling them both out of the moment. "Prince Varek," came Elan's voice through the intercom, "we've detected a signal. It's not from the Derkalian fleet, but it's on a collision course with us." Varek turned to Kara, his eyes flashing with urgency. "Get to the bridge. We need to assess the situation." Kara nodded, her heart pounding again. There was no time to waste. They had just escaped one danger, only to find themselves heading straight into another. The bridge was a scene of controlled chaos when Kara arrived. Elan and the rest of the crew were busy monitoring the ship's systems, their eyes flicking to the various screens as they tracked the incoming signal. "What's going on?" Kara asked, her voice sharp as she joined Varek at the main console. Elan turned toward her. "The signal's coming from a nearby sector, but it's not Derkalian. It's something else, something old." Varek's eyes narrowed. "Old? How old?" Elan shook her head. "We're not sure, but it's faint. And it's approaching fast." Kara exchanged a look with Varek. The air between them thickened, the sense of impending danger settling like a weight on her shoulders. What were they about to encounter? Another fleet? A new threat? Or worse, something connected to the legend of humanity? "We can't outrun it," Varek said, his voice steady but firm. "Prepare for a rendezvous." Kara stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the cryptic data. The signal wasn't familiar, but there was something unsettling about it. She could feel the pieces of her past shifting uneasily in her mind, like a puzzle that had long since been broken and forgotten. Before she could voice her concerns, the ship jolted, throwing her off balance. The entire vessel shook as a series of explosions rocked the hull. She scrambled to her feet, her pulse racing. "We're under attack!" Elan shouted, her hands moving frantically over the controls. "Elan, get us out of here!" Varek ordered. "Now!" But it was too late. The hull groaned as a massive force slammed into the side of the Khalees rift. The ship lurched violently, the sound of metal scraping against metal deafening in the small, enclosed space. Kara barely had time to grab hold of the nearest console before she was thrown against the wall. The lights flickered, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, the shaking stopped. What the hell was that? Kara demanded, her heart pounding in her chest. Varek stood motionless at the helm, his eyes wide with disbelief. "We've made contact with something far worse than the Derkalians." A new signal appeared on the screen. A single word, blinking ominously, "Awakening."